I don't know if many of you are familiar or not familiar with neurolanguage coaching. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a background, a little bit of explaining what it is for those of you who don't know. If you already know, please forgive me and just maybe sit back, relax, and enjoy the refresher. You know, sometimes Zoom makes me crazy because I've got windows and things open all over the place. I need 3 computers here. Now, I want to start with this in our minds. You know, as educators, I think all of us desire to bring back the joy of learning. I think many educators in schools across the world are not able to bring the joy back because of the systems, the curricula, or whatever is happening in the world. So I think this is something that each and every one of us want to aspire to, bringing back this joy of learning. And these quotes, well, this first quote, the joy of learning, is as indispensable in study as breathing in running. I think is a beautiful way of bringing across that message. And many of you know that I'm a great fan of Richard Boyatzis. He is a coaching professional. And he talks about this, how do we get this joyful discovery, playful creation into flowing performance? And that flow state is something I think that we also aspire to. So how can neurolanguage coaching help teachers? Well, in 2017, I did actually create a PDF book, which is called Brain Friendly Materials. It's not publicly available, it's privately available. If any of you are interested, you can always connect with me after the webinar. And in that book, you've got 3 circles that overlap. Now, definitely, we are bringing in the neuro, which is the psychology, neuropsychology, the neuroscience, the emotional intelligence, etc. Plus, we're bringing in the teaching, plus we're bringing in the professional coaching. And right in the middle, that intersection gives us neurolanguage coaching. And yes, Beth, the Venn diagram. So neurolanguage coaching, you've got this overlap where the disciplines converge and come in. So what are we bringing in? Well, on the one side, we are bringing in the coaching, professional coach training, which is accredited by the International Coach Federation. We're bringing in skilled coaching conversations where we can coach around anything, whether it's emotional triggers, how to learn, improving cognitive skills, the language learning itself, all of that is handled with very, very skilled coaching conversations. Plus, we bring in the coaching competences. We bring in the structure from coaching. And I always think that we bring in the spirit of coaching, but not the directiveness. So the spirit of empowering, the spirit of bringing people into that space of believing in themselves and helping them to become autonomous. So not only believing in themselves, but also doing it themselves. From the neuro, we're bringing in the principles from the neuroscientific research. And those principles, we are integrating them into the process. So everything that we do in neurolanguage coaching has a reason based on those principles. We speak with the learner about how the brain functions, how the brain is reacting, or how the brain learns, and adapting it to each and every learner. And we're also bringing in that metacognition. We know that every brain is different, so we need to adapt to each learner. Emotional intelligence as well, that sensitivity, and next week we'll be going a lot deeper into that, and the neuropsychology as well. So a lot of those aspects are coming in, and that is, if you like, the package that neurolanguage coaching is bringing. So just to put that into, let's say, a little bit of a description of what we do. We communicate through coaching conversations. We use competences and ethics from the coaching world, professional coaching. We use the structures, the goal settings, the actions, the motivation, the commitment, everything coming in, the time period, the goal review, all of those are coming into the structure. We have a clear understanding which we're bringing to the learner. We have the practical implementation. We're helping them to develop their own awareness. We have our own unique models. And we use the expression of being brain friendly. We are making sure that they're in a very calm, relaxed state and enjoying the process as well. And another thing that we do, we become skilled road mappers. And the roadmap actually is the certainty and the structure that we give and the learner has, together with our flexibility and spontaneity of being a coach. And I always talk about the dichotomy of coaching, that coaching presence, dancing in the moment with the learner, but at the same time, having certainty and a structure in the background. So, one thing that we do is implement the metacognition. Metacognition is something that I personally am fascinated about, because maybe over the last 10 years is where I have become more aware of my brain and how my brain functions, learns, and reacts. And, you know, I'm kind of like an old lady, everybody now. I wish I'd have known this when I was younger. How many of you would have liked to have known what you know now when you were younger? Just give me a sign in the chat box. Goodness, how different life would have been, huh? Wow. Yes, Valerie, you're saying yes. Yes, 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 yes. If we knew then what we know now. So one of the, I'm going to say, the amazing things that a lot of our neurolanguage coaches are doing, you are bringing this information to your learners. And those learners may be children, teenagers, adults, but you are bringing this to them. And I'm hearing some beautiful, beautiful stories of kiddies managing their brains, managing their reactions. And some years ago, I was looking at there was a program on the BBC about how in some schools in England, they're bringing in meditation for children of 3, 4, 5 years old. And there was one story of the little girl was on the film saying that when she sees her mummy stressed, she goes up to her and says, "Mummy, mummy, you need to go meditate." That's a little kid of 3 years old. Wow. If we could get more generations like that, we're going to be, in 20 years' time, we're going to be a calm population in the world, hopefully. So after the introduction of neurolanguage coaching, and I have just given an introduction because my focus today is really on the learners. So we're going to take them into different tranches. We're going to go into children first, we're going to go into teens, then we're going to go into adults, and then finally we're going to go into the special needs. And that's when Luca's going to be stepping in. Now, many of you probably know this beautiful lady, Maria Montessori, who, wow, what a phenomena she must have been, huh? At the beginning of the 19th century. And how amazing that she really seemed to understand how children learn. And she categorized children into exactly how we are now categorizing them from the brain research. So she knew that children under the age of 7 don't learn in a certain way, they learn in a different way. And she knew that after the age of 7 or 8, they needed a different way of learning. So the phenomena that she could actually understand flow state. And in 2005, and by the way, this is the gentleman who actually was the creator of the flow state. and you'll have to all forgive me because my normal pronunciation, oh, Reka's here. Reka, you can help me with this. The Hungarian gentleman, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, how am I doing?
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Thank you. You see, I always say it wrong. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Csikszentmihalyi.
Thank you. Thank you, Reka. This gentleman from positive psychology actually did a lot of research into flow states. And interestingly, in 2005, they detected that children in Montessori settings achieved more flow experience than children in other schools. So I would just like to pay homage to this wonderful lady before we get going. Now, neurolanguage coaching for small children. Can we apply the principles of neurolanguage coaching for small children? Yes, we can. But we do have to understand quite a few things. Now, we have to possibly look at children under 7 and then look at children over 7. Under 7, children are literally absorbing information. So it is a subconscious, implicit input. The major reason for this is because this prefrontal cortex does not start to develop until after the age of 7. Children under the age of 7, fantastic plasticity. They pick up so much, and languages as well, they really do. And the research demonstrates that between the years of 2 and 4, those are the best years for language learning for kiddies. And literally it's because they're just absorbing it. By the way, I get a lot of people asking me, about children learning many languages, trilingual, quadrilingual. I actually know quite a few children at the age of 3 or 4 who are trilingual and quadrilingual. And one thing that you often hear is that these children are late speakers. And one of the reasons for that could be that there's so much coming in, the children need more time to sort of sort them out in the brain. But their subconscious brain is doing it. It really is. I don't know if any of you have seen, there's I think it's a little Russian girl who speaks 12 languages on YouTube. Unbelievable. This little girl just goes from one language to the other. I think she was, when she recorded that, she was like 4 or 5 years old. Wow. Luminita, yes, they absorb everything at this age. And this is it. It's almost like the subconscious is wide open and they're just taking it in. Now, babies in those early 2 years, we are absorbing so much in those years that when the number of connections hits the peak level, our brain actually goes into a pruning process. Pruning means clearing out connections that we don't need. So how phenomenal that in those first 2 years, we're just taking everything in that we have to then prune it, get rid of it, what we don't need, and then focus in on what's being, what are the connections that we need for the life that we're in. So we have to distinguish. Children in those early years are learning through repetition, through observation, through priming, through experiencing. Literally implicit input. Now, from the age of 7 onwards, that's when we start to develop executive functions, prefrontal cortex functions. And I'm just having a look, 1 second. Yes, we're going to go into some baby neuroscience in a minute. So if you think about it, when we start to develop these executive functions, it's almost like our brain starts changing a little bit the way that we operate. Because the brain now is looking at new information and it's trying to see if it connects in with something that's already there. So scaffolding, connecting to previous information or lodged information, stored information. If it does connect, then the brain is associating and connecting. If it doesn't, then the brain has to create new neural networks. So it's almost like our brain gets a little bit, I'm going to say, clever with how it handles new information. And from then on, our brain is very much a connection machine, an associating machine. Now, a question for all of you. We've said that the prefrontal cortex, the executive functions, start kicking in at the age of 7 or 8. At what age do we really achieve the fully adult functioning brain, like the prefrontal cortex is fully developed? I know some of you know this answer.
It depends based on females and males, doesn't it?
Well, I think that the latest research was about 18 months ago, and they were suggesting that it is actually late 20s, early 30s, whether male or female. And that is when we get to that fully developed adult brain. Very late, very late. Yes, some of you are saying 28, 25 and 30. Yes, the research that I saw was January 2021, and they were saying between 28 and 32, that sort of late stage. So when we are working with smaller kids, it's going to be different to when we're working with children after the age of 7 or 8. So we're going to come into the smaller ones first. What can we use? Well, we can change the way that we communicate, even with the smaller kids. Definitely, we can control when we need to be directive and give them orders and commands clearly, and when we don't need to be directive. Now, one of the major problems is a lot of the time we're working on autopilot. And we don't realize that we're being directed. We don't realize that we're giving a command. We're not conscious of how we are communicating. And this is where it's essential that we start to be able to control when we want to give a command and when we don't. And I would say most of the time we should try not to give a command. Asking permission. How about? What do you think? Even with smaller kids. Now, I've got an example from years and years ago. I had a friend who was a football coach. And he was like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Kids loved him. And I mean little kids, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. It was almost like he was, I don't know, for them, he was amazing. They all wanted to be with him when he did camps. They were always, the parents were ringing up saying, my kids want to be with you. They loved what you did and they want to be back. And I was curious what he was doing. And I went to watch him one day. And he had these children eating out of his hand because he really embraced the spirit of the team coach. Hey guys, what do you think if? How about? Shall we do this? Shall we do that? What do you think if we go ahead and do that? He never told them, do this, do that, run around the pitch. He would only speak to them with permissions, suggestions, and getting them on board. And they loved it. They really loved it. So how children respond is interesting. Yes, we need the partnership skills, absolutely, even with the little kids. And, you know, as you start to develop your coaching skills and coaching conversations, with kids, it's really about active listening as well. But when we say active listening, I mean reformulating back and checking in with them. So is this what you said? Is this what you've just told me? Can I just check with you? And just reflecting back in their language. So you mean this? And checking in. But also going into compassion. So instead of trying to convince kiddies when they don't feel good or they don't like something, instead of trying to convince them and really, I think a lot of the times as teachers, we try to bring in that, hey, no, you're doing great. I think you're fantastic. Come on, I know you can do it. Instead of doing that, we need to move away from that and really listen to them and say, look, I'm sorry that you're not feeling good here. I'm sorry that you're not feeling that you're able to do this. And then the compassion kicks in when you ask them, what can we do then to make it different for you? Or how can we make you feel better here? And just trying to see how you can bring in the active listening, recognizing how they feel and not cancelling out their feelings. And very simple reformulations, so very simple language. And always giving a little bit of signposting. This is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to do it. And really making sure that you're giving them that psychological safety so that they understand and checking in if they've understood. Now, obviously, little kiddies in those years, they're still finding themselves. They might not know how they're feeling. So you could become creative. Well, tell me in colors how you're feeling. Or tell me if you could be an animal, what animal would it be? Or if you could make a sound, how would that sound be? And just becoming creative to communicate, to get them to share what's happening for them. And if you can, try to keep those questions open. I know we have a tendency as teachers to go into closed questions all the time, but really try to keep them open. Layla, I've just seen you've written in the chat box 478999999. Not sure what that means. So not sure if there's some sort of crazy messages going on there, but I'll let you deal with that. Maybe you can share with us what you're saying there as a comment. Recognition as well. Recognition for kiddies is essential, really, if they've taken the time, if they've taken the effort, even if they've done something that's not brilliant, just recognizing them takes a second. And that recognition will help them also to come into that positive learning state. Everything that we're looking for is the calm, positive learning state. Now, in this particular study, we have Carol Dweck was one of the researchers. She's the lady who wrote the book, Growth Mindset. And actually, they did quite a lot of research on the impact of sharing with children about the brain, about neuroplasticity, about how they can learn the growth mindset. And here you can see that they definitely had an impact. And one particular group who were told the brain can change, you can learn, you can do it, given that feeling of growth, they actually demonstrated an upward pathway of grades over 2 years of junior school. In comparison to another group who were not told that message. So it had an impact on their learning. Now, this is a more recent study, and again, these kiddies were given information about the brain, cognitive neuroscience. The difference in this study is it didn't impact in their results, but it had a great impact on them. Their organizational skills, their ability to plan, their feeling of being confident and self-reliant totally increased. So again, it did have an impact, but in this case, we couldn't see it with results. I do think there's going to be more research coming out over the years. So with small children, we can communicate in a different way. We can also bring them baby neuroscience. We can talk to them about the brain in very simple terms, and especially about fight or flight. what is happening when we go into that panic. Maybe the children are unable to understand, and really helping them to understand that this happens to all of us. How many of you, and I'll put my hand up as well, how many of you have had panic attacks in your life? Right. When you and I went through that stage, how many of us thought, oh my God, this is only me? It's not, it's all of us. This is literally our survival mechanism kicking in, and maybe something's triggered it, or maybe we've gone through so much stress, or maybe we had a very stressful event in our life and our brain is in that mode. It happens to us all. And by the way, there is an amazing author called Wessel van der Kolk. He actually spoke at one of my conferences a couple of years ago. He is one of the most expert trauma specialists in the world. He's Dutch. He's written a phenomenal book called The Body Keeps the Score. I strongly recommend it to all of you. In his book, he says 90% of the population will have panic attacks at some point in their life. 90%. Some as children, some as teenagers, some as adults, some as seniors. 90%. Now, how phenomenal would it be that we're actually talking to children about this and helping them to recognize if that's happening, and then either to get help or to be able to manage themselves. I have a beautiful story. I'm not sure if Christy is here today, but Christy is the mama who became a neurolanguage coach some years ago. And permission to share, Christy. Christy knows that I say this story a lot. Christy had to move to another country, and her son was starting to get nervous. And she sat him down. She explained fight or flight, very simple terms, baby terms. I think he was about 5, 6 years old, if I remember rightly. And she said to him, you know, this is what happens. Your brain is trying to protect you. Your brain doesn't know where you're going. You're going to a new place, and the brain is saying, hey, I don't like this. And that's why the body is then reacting, and you're feeling this, the nerves and the fear. And she said, you know, if this happens to you, come and tell me, and then we can help to calm you down. And literally, he would then be coming to her and saying, Mummy, my brain's starting again. And she'd sit him down, and they'd go into some breathing to calm him down. How beautiful is that? How amazing if we could really get kiddies to come into that sort of management. And helping them, as we said before, helping them to manage their emotions, expressing in colors, shapes, objects, breathing, meditation. Now, there are a lot of schools who are coming into this mindfulness to kiddies. And you can do this in various ways. Now, maybe let me just add here, everybody. I'm not saying that neurolanguage coaching incorporates this. This is something extra that you can be incorporating together with everything that we do in neurolanguage coaching. So I always think that mindfulness moments are the golden moments for learning. And you can use these as sort of power surges here and there to help boost the brain, to help calm them down. Now, you could take kids on guided imagery. You could take them through breathing. Remember that breathing instantly changes the brainwaves. Instantly changes the brainwaves. So as soon as you get somebody to go into a different pattern of breathing, or you get them to breathe slowly, calmly, you're going to get them into alpha brainwaves. Definitely you could play with that. You can get kiddies pretending to be animals, pretending to blow up a balloon. Again, it's about being imaginative. Or you could even get mindfulness through movement. Get them into some funny yoga poses. the animals, the downward dog, the cat, the frog, the pigeon, the dolphin, and even sort of mindfulness through sensory perception and experience. So all of these are just ideas to bring into the learning with kiddies. And taking them through coaching conversations. This is also key. Now, we have a coaching conversation called Pact PQC. And this particular conversation is about helping them to come into the awareness and keeping them away from the books, but getting them actually talking with you. Now, for smaller children, it might not work so much, but you could have little bits of this, you know, like signposting. Now we're going to talk about this. And getting them talking with you about something. What do they know? Getting them sharing what they might have an idea about. And then bringing that information with interaction. Varvara, yes, you're absolutely right. We have a lot of, well, I was speaking with Heart Math Institute over the last months, and really there are a lot of reports of children who are having problems to reintegrate. Problems to socialize, and a lot of trauma. So as educators, I think, you know, the work that all of you are doing is going to be so important as we move forwards. It really is. Now we'll come back to the Pact PQC in a bit. You can be asking children what they like, especially small kiddies. Even small kiddies, ask them what they like, ask them what they don't like. Try to see if you can get what activities they like. Try to see if you can get them in groups of those that like to do one activity or those that like to do another activity. I know that younger kids, it's not so easy to set goals, but what you could do is kind of give them some ideas and then ask them, okay, what would you like to do from these ideas? So there might be more teacher stimulation with the younger kiddies, but a lot of them do have a mind of their own. I don't know about all of you, but I know that my mother had a real battle with me when I was a kid. Just to make all of you smile, at the age of 3, she went to a nursery to take me to this nursery. And as soon as she got there, she said to them, I can't leave Rachel here. And they said, well, why not? What's wrong with us? And she said, because you've got an open gate. She'll be gone. That was me at 3 years old. She knew that if there was an open gate and she left me there, Rachel would have gone out the gate if there was something I didn't like. So I do think it's about not underestimating the toddlers. And if any of you are parents, I think you know that. So finding out in their language what they want, what activities, really getting it to be relevant to them as much as we can. And I'm going to say even to get them to embody the learning, getting them doing it, they experience at this age. Remember, they're taking it in through the subconscious. It really is imprinting in. Constant repetition, you know, by reformulating and summarizing, you're bringing that repetition back to them and learning by doing, letting them doing it. Now, you could also think about, even from younger ages, how can they foster a team spirit? How can they help each other? How can they learn to check in on each other? How can they learn to really ask each other, how are you doing, what do you need, how can I help? And getting your groups of learners into that mode of we're a team is going to also change classroom dynamics, definitely. Now, I do want to just, this is a little bit of an extra, by the way, everybody. I just want to talk about how we learn. All of us, kiddies, teenagers, adults. And literally, learning is about encoding, storage, retrieval. encoding is really imprinting the information into our memory banks. This is something that I'm particularly fascinated in, because what is it that we can do that's going to get them to imprint instantly? And I call this the perfect learning state. What are the ingredients to get them to imprint? Well, in my humble opinion, I do think these are the ingredients: stressless learning, no pressure to perform, even a voiced intention to remember something, positive emotions, and embodiment. And if we come into each of these, calm communication, we've got all of the research. If the amygdala senses uncertainty, honestly, it's going to focus all of the energy on that. We need to get them calm. We also know 1 drop of cortisol totally disrupts neuroplasticity. And we also know that the way that we speak can literally affect the physiological stress. Negative words, positive words. Calm state. Well, firstly, if we are calm, they will be calm. Mirror neurons, empathy, really understanding how to come into that interaction. Yes, positive environment. And no pressure to perform. Some of you may have heard me talk about this at the conference we just had. We had a conference a couple of months ago. You can get the video recordings. And one story that came to my mind when I was preparing this presentation was, I think I was about 8 years old. I remember when the end of the year, I did my maths exam. I remember the teacher reading out the results. And she was reading out from the bottom. And I'm waiting for my name, because I never believed that I could perform in mathematics. And she got to reading all of the grades, and then she was coming to the top grades. And I got a 1 in maths. Now, I think I was shocked, but the teacher was even more shocked. And she voiced that. She said, well, grade 1, we've got blah, blah, and we've got Rachel. Goodness, Rachel. Now, that comment and that way of bringing that information to me, actually then, after that, I never, ever, ever performed well in mathematics, because I felt the pressure. So it's interesting, you know, when you look back in your life, and we all look back, how many times has that happened to all of us? So again, as an educator, how do we remain neutral? And how do we really bring across information? And instead of saying it with shock and surprise, maybe she would have said it with joy and, you know, praise of, well done, all of you, and but not treating me any different to anybody else. So it's interesting that, you know, we have to be consciously aware of when we are applying pressure to learners. And here you do have some research talking about that sort of feeling of pressure that learners feel. And it totally can change the way that they learn. Now, another interesting thing is, how can we voice the intention that we want to remember something? Have any of you in your life ever consciously made the decision, I want to remember this moment? Maybe it was a beautiful moment where you went to a wedding, or you went to I don't know. And you really said to yourself, I want this moment engraved in my head. How about we start doing that with learning? How about we start to get our learners to really say, this is going to stick. I'm going to create that voiced intention. And actually, Daniel Siegel talks about intentions. It's almost like priming the brain, gearing the brain up that, yes, my intention is to keep this. How about we try it with our learners, with ourselves? And writing it down makes a difference. The tendency to write things on the laptop is never going to be the same as actually processing it and writing it down. How many of us have lost the skill of writing? Wow. You know, when I get a pen nowadays, I go into joy because I love, especially ink pens. We don't write enough anymore. I can see you're holding an ink pen. Yes. Yes, on Saskia. Love it. Yes. So again, how can we encourage learners to really make notes? Go back to that. Even if we've got computers and laptops and whatever we've got, encouraging them, pen to paper is brain to paper as well. So again, these are intentions to remember. Now, emotions are key. And one thing that I will say here is tough love doesn't work. Tough love might work with some kids, but with other kids, it might absolutely destroy them. So I think we have to be careful. I think if you want to go into that sort of little bit of a tough stance, I would ask permission. May I be a little bit tough with you? Even asking kids permission to kind of come into that space so that they know it's not that you mean it, but you want and explain, I want the best for you. How can I get the best from you? That sort of signposting that that's what you're doing is going to be much more brain friendly than actually doing it without them understanding it. And we see from the research, physical punishment actually totally affects with mental health problems, problems with, self-esteem, etc. And even the research showing that boot camps, where they get kids really doing things boot camp style, actually increases the likelihood of offenses. Interesting research there. Nuria, you're saying, what is not working? Oh, tough love. Tough love, that sort of hard approach, when you're telling kids in a very strong way. That's what I mean with tough love. Nuria, just checking in. I'm not sure how you would say that in Spanish. I don't even know if it exists in Spanish. El trato duro. In italiano, Luca, ¿cómo se debe?
Tough love. Yeah, la mano dura. That would be, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I've got a horrible fly that's trying to attack me.
Yeah.
So would it be la mano dura?
Yeah, I would say the closest one. We don't really have an expression for tough love. I'll think about it.
Right. Albana is saying amore difficile. Amore difficile. Non so se quello può entrare in la classe. Amore difficile? No. Luca? Maybe. Yes. Okay, so I always think permission, compassion is going to work so much better than the tough love approach. And embodiment, when we say embodiment, I really mean doing it, getting kiddies doing it. If you want kids to learn how to go shopping, get them acting, going shopping and using the language in that situation, getting them into that sort of process of rehearsing, practicing, living it. And Doyle, one of my favorite expressions in the neuroscientific literature, to learn it, you have to do it. And that's true whether you're a kid, whether you're a teen, whether you're an adult. To learn it, you have to do it. And one of the best things to learn is to teach others. That's why us educators are really good at what we do, because we're continuously reinforcing it by teaching everybody else. So we need them to be giving it back to us more and more. And yes, less is more. Less of us, more of them, all the way through. Now, let's go into a little bit teenagers. I'm conscious that we are, actually it's going to be a long webinar this evening. Not so long, but we are going to go over the hour. Teenagers, beautiful age, because in this age, it is the amygdala driving, which means the emotional brain is in the driving seat. Everything is processed through the amygdala and not through the prefrontal cortex. So you get a lot of emotional reactions, and here, definitely, we need to go into those coaching conversations. We need to go into a lot of permission, a lot of checking in, a lot of open questions. We need to start getting them to feel their autonomy. We need to move away from telling them what to do. How do you want to do this? What do you think? Share with me what's happening with you. And the more you do that, even if they don't want to speak, if you let them hang in the silence and you really hold off and be silent, they'll get uncomfortable with the silence and they'll come back with something. And be patient, yes, absolutely. Now, reformulations, summaries, signposting, all the time. And in these years, never, never, never using the word why. Change the word why. What is the reason for? And that will push them into the rational brain. Why didn't you clean your room? We need to change that to, what is the reason you didn't clean your room? And you're going to get a less emotional response. Why not is still challenging. So I would say, as soon as you say the word reason, the brain's going to connect into that prefrontal cortex. And you're going to have less danger of provoking an emotional response. And finding out how they want to learn, what activities they like, what they don't like, especially. Trying to see how they can engage the emotions. How does this make you feel? Share with me. Again, real, relevant, personal. And helping them to provoke those brain connections. Learning by association in those years, we need to start training them how to do that, how to connect. And again, team spirit. Maybe if they're in a language group, you can get them to come together to agree on one group goal and how they can help each other and what can they do to really make sure that everybody's got that before we go to the next goal. And getting them to connect and help when they're not with you. Now, just a little bit of a rundown on the teenage brain. We did say earlier, this rational executive functioning part of the brain until the late 20s, early 30s is not fully developed. The older we get, the more we do think with this prefrontal cortex and the less with the emotional brain. Obviously, teenagers are totally perceiving, receiving, interpreting the world through the amygdala. And they are still developing how to connect in that emotional brain with the rational brain. Those years are where we're learning how to do that. Teenage brain hungry for stimulation, but it's also very prone to addictions. At this age, we can get very addicted. Mobile phones, for example, games, for example. Definitely, it's a propensity of the teenage brain because we're primed to learn quickly. So that's also something you can talk to teenagers about this, explain to them, this is how your brain is at this stage in life. It's physiological. Now, this is the part that I smile because I actually think I never stopped being a teenager, because apparently between puberty and the age of 19, the body clock is different. And teenagers tend to sleep later and wake up later. And this is where I say my brain stayed at teenage stage because I hate going to bed and I prefer to wake up later. And also tidiness as well. It's a cognitive function. So this is, again, teenagers struggle with things that are requiring the more executive functions of the brain. So there is a reason for everything. And if we can try to help them, then you're going to be really bringing them that sort of understanding of themselves. And Jasmine, you're with me on this, huh? I can see that you work from home and it's perfect I love that word. We are adultines. I love it. Yes, I'm an adultine. Now, we've looked at children, we've looked at teenagers. Let's just look at classes, groups, schools. Can neurolanguage coaching work? Now, we do have a lot of neurolanguage coaches actually in schools. And yes, they are using a lot of the coaching communication, a lot of the information about the brain, and also that sort of technique of setting goals, setting missions, and getting them to decide how they want to work. Splitting them into larger groups, smaller groups, getting them into teams that are doing different things, and then coming back into plenaries to share. In a minute, I'm going to go into a little bit of the Howard Gardner stuff as well. One particular neurolanguage coach in Chile, South Chile, she actually went back from the course and went in with that structure of, okay, class of 30 kids, how about we talk about getting a goal? And they were, in fact, she was doing Spanish with them, so native language with the group. And the goal that they set for themselves was to create their own magazine. That was the goal. And they had a set time period, and in that magazine, they were going to demonstrate their language capacity and skills. They decided on the different activities that they were all going to do. And literally, she just then became the facilitator for that group. She was there, she was guiding, she was, if they needed her, but they did it. And they actually created this magazine, and everybody was so impressed with them. The local newspaper did a report on their achievement. Phenomenal work. So yes, you can bring a lot of the coaching principles, the coaching structure into groups. Now, Howard Gardner, some countries love him, some countries don't. Do we have any Argentinians in the group here? Tenemos gente de Argentina aquí porque Argentina is incredible, Veronica. Beautiful country, Argentina, because you embrace totally emotional intelligence, Howard Gardner, multiple intelligence, everything. And I have to say, in all of my travels across the world, Argentinian teachers, you have such a sensitivity from all of this training. It's phenomenal. Definitely. Now, on the other side, everybody, England totally rejects Howard Gardner and his theories. So there you see how some countries really accept it and some countries really reject it. Gardner is a Harvard professor. Still, I think he's an emeritus now. And his perspective was really based on the fact that IQ is very limited. And he proposed this sort of intelligences, first 8, then 9, and intelligences in the way that we perceive and receive information and how we are all of us different. And maybe there are certain ways that we can bring in information. Now, I like to see it like this, with the word smart after them, because it helps me to understand what each one is. So we've got the word smart, we've got the numbers smart, the picture smart, the body smart, the music smart, the people smart, the self smart, the nature smart, and the spiritually smart. I don't know if that helps all of you, but it definitely helped me to understand all of these. Now, the interesting thing would be if you are working with big classes, you can get different activities that reflect the different intelligences. And there are some schools in the US that work with the different intelligences. They have all of these different activities set up for kiddies in one classroom. And there you see how children can even go and try things out and discover themselves. And you might have one task that can be achieved by experiencing different activities that reflect the different intelligences. Now, I started a new training, which is called the Neurolanguage Education training. It's for teachers of any discipline to become neuroheart educators, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the end today. And on the training, I actually get the participants in this training to go into a breakout room and think about all the different activities for one particular topic. And believe me, I've had some amazing responses from teachers that come back with all of these phenomenal ways reflecting these intelligences. So here is where you can be very creative, everybody, to do different things with your learners. Now, we're moving on. We've looked at small children, we've looked at teenagers. Can we deal with beginners with neurolanguage coaching? Yes, we can. Now, with beginners, obviously, you need to have a common language. So you cannot use neurolanguage coaching if there is not a language in which you can communicate. Not at all. You need to have that base communication so you can go into setting the goals, setting the activities, coaching around problems, triggers, emotions, really creating the roadmap for that beginner has to be in the common language. Now, the one thing that you do when you come into focused beginners learning is you really go in for what they want. How many of you have learned a language with a book and you've got to chapter 4 and you've thrown the book away? And can I say it's normally the chapter that starts with directions? I hate directions. And it's normally in all the beginners' books. That's when I throw the book away. I don't want, as a beginner, to know how to say directions in that language. I want to know how to go and do things that I want to do. And that's what we do when we come into coaching. We really go into what you want to talk about, who are you talking with, what type of conversations, let's break it down and let's set goals. And on the grammar side, we're going to give you a choice of what grammar you can start with. And with the grammar, I will be steering and guiding, but you are going to be choosing where to go. So with beginners, you create their roadmap. Now, let's just talk about this, because if I've got a beginner who says to me, okay, I want to learn Spanish, I want to be able to go to a restaurant and order food. Fantastic. When I come into those sessions with my client, firstly, it's going to make a difference if it's a client that already knows other languages or if it's a client that has no idea. Now, if it's somebody who knows other languages, I'm going to be trying to scaffold. But in any case, with any beginner, what we need to do is create a database of expressions and words and create that database together. So, ordering in a restaurant, I would break up that conversation. First part of that conversation, meeting and greeting. Let's brainstorm all the different ways that we can meet and greet in Spanish. Second step in that conversation, maybe a little bit of small talk. How are you today? Beautiful weather, isn't it? And the response. Let's create a few alternatives. Next part of that conversation, the first part of a conversation in the restaurant. Menu, please. What's on the menu? What's the dish of the day? Table for two. And let's build up those. So literally, we would be analyzing the conversation, breaking it down, building up alternatives. And then when I've got that sort of database with my beginner, we can then go and play with it. Role plays, conversations, let's imagine, let's get you doing it. And literally then you go into that sort of repetition of doing it. That beginner then could go to a restaurant and have that conversation. And that's what you do with beginners. And on the other side, you reinforce it with a little bit of grammar focus as well. So you've got grammar input, and I always call it mastery input. So absolutely, we can work, and we do work with beginners. And they fast track. They really do fast track with us. And we also talk to them about how to learn consciously, how to learn subconsciously. Subconscious input is key as well. For beginners, very, very important. For them to understand that they need to bombard the brain with the language. On the other side, advanced learners, definitely we can use neurolanguage coaching with advanced learners. Everything that we do is about finding out how do we get you deeper into the language? How do we get you into more fluency? How do we get you into more natural language? And introducing maybe complex grammar areas, maybe more complex conversations. If you think about grammar areas, future tenses with tentatives, conjunctions, prepositional verbs, phrasal verbs, participle clauses, adverbial clauses, inversion, emphasis, cleft. We need to understand what are the advanced structures that we can stimulate them with. Many, many times advanced learners are complacent and they don't have that sort of stimulation or curiosity. And that's our mission as a coach, to really get them curious and wanting more. Now, can I say, when I had a client, the reason I came into this question of advanced was 20 years ago. I had a client who said to me, I want to go deeper. He was a C1. He really wanted to go deeper and deeper and deeper. I was terrified. I was terrified because even as a native speaker, I hadn't got a clue how to go into those grammar structures. I'd never done it before, even as a native. So I had to go away and really think about, okay, how on earth can I take this man deeper? And that's when you start to really discover. And a lot of you may know that I do grammar breakdowns. And that's where I went away and did grammar breakdowns for complex areas. And then together with the client, we were building them up and getting him into a deeper language. A great experience for me. Now, here, I can see Luca's getting prepared. Special needs. Well, I do want to say that quite a few of our neurolanguage coaches over the last years have actually been involved in a volunteer program that we were running. And one of the volunteer programs was, in fact, with Luca's organization. And, well, maybe, Luca, I'm going to shut up and let you take over now. And I can move the slides for you. By the way, that extra slide, did you send it to me?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Okay, then I will disappear in the background to fish that out, and I'll leave it to you. And just give me a sign when you want me to move forwards.
Thank you, first of all, for the amazing introduction that you did at the beginning. And I want to thank Rachel and all the coaches that participated in the volunteer program. So a bit of history. Educo, the name education, and co is the basically Como, the city that we are in. The nonprofit, as you can see in the next slide, has a couple of goals, which is help students with learning differences. We talk about learning difficulties. I also like to talk about differences for a few reasons. So there are four main differences, which are dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and dysorthography. Lago di Como, yes. And for example, kids that have dysorthography don't have the eye-to-hand coordination to write in cursive, for example, but still they are judged in school based on how well they write cursive, right? And we don't think that's quite fair. It's as if, for example, I need glasses to see. If I were judged in school for how well I can see in the distance, but without my glasses on, that would be unfair to me. I need those glasses, and these kids need some tools to help them learn in different ways. So Rachel was speaking about two things: the joy of learning, which is something innate. No, it's called curiosity. When we are small, we are curious about everything, and then we get to school, and if I ask a lot of people in school, what's your favorite subject? A lot of them will say it's recess. And maybe they're just having fun, but there's a little truth behind it. And the second thing is believing in oneself. So kids that have these learning differences are so often labeled as maybe lazy, or they just are not good enough for studying a lot of pages, and they are even bullied, as someone is saying in the comments. But what's more, what's sadder, in my opinion, is that a lot of teachers as well don't recognize these differences, don't recognize these difficulties, and so the joy of learning goes away, and the self-esteem goes away. And this translates into early school leaving. We have a lot of kids that abandon their studies, even before finishing high school. So a bit of history about Educo in the next slide is that basically we were born in 2017, three friends that had to do in a way or another with learning differences. In 2018, we started collaborating with schools to have a conversation about this new way of learning. We started personal fundraising in 2019, and from end of 2019 to 2020 and 2021, we launched a series of projects that basically give money to the families to get private education and private tutoring, because kids with learning differences need to have, as much as I need to have my glasses on, they need to have a constant help to navigate towards their, high school graduation, and also later in university. Later on in 2022 and this year, we are starting also to incorporate projects for kids with autism, high functioning autism. And if we go into the next slide, you'll see that one of the one of the things that we want to do for our kids is to make learning English fun. So in Italian schools, A lot of languages are taught. English is mandatory. And kids with learning differences, with dyslexia, for example, they are able to recognize patterns and to do mathematical progressions, but they're not very good at remembering things. So if I have to explain to someone why 2 + 2 is 4, I have a lot of things to do. I can take 2 apples, another 2 apples, bring them together, and that's 4. But sometimes students ask me, why is a sedia called chair in English? And there's no reason for that. It's just the way it is. And through the neurolanguage coaches, what we saw, thanks to the coaches that volunteered, first of all, they're helping students to learn a new language. This is crucial for their future. Learning a language and knowing more than one language is something that is now basically mandatory, right? To have a good job, to be able to communicate. Maybe you work in a big company that has branches overseas. It boosts their confidence because they come from a background of just knowing that they're not good enough. They ease the anxiety towards homework. Kids, as Rachel was saying, with learning differences, they have a lot of panic attacks. They don't leave the school with the right mindset. They are scared of it. They are scared of the mark on the paper. They don't want to upset the teacher. And having spendable skills is something that we want to do. Let's go into the next slide. And we see that, as I said, for there's one. Oh, okay, it was done.
Luca,
Yeah.
Is this the new slide in the background? The one that you sent me?
I think that there's something missing. Do you want me to share my screen, maybe?
You can do, yes. Let me
Yeah,
just,
okay.
hang on 1 second. Let me make you a co-host. There you go.
Yeah.
Apologies, everybody. This is the commercial break.
Okay, I'll try to share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes, super.
Okay, so learning a new language, and this is the example that it's always brought up. You know, it's difficult, especially saying a language that it's not phonetically consistent, right? So we in Italy, we don't have spelling bees. You read it just as it is, 90% of the time. But with English and other languages, it's really, really hard to explain why the first one is thorough and the other one is through. I hope I'm saying them correctly. And if you're in the Como Lake area now, we are also starting a summer camp for Ukrainian kids that are fleeing the war. So this is just to, if you're in the area, you know someone that would like to participate and volunteer, it would be fantastic. But the gist of my presence here is just to say that thanks to the ELC coaches in general that volunteered, all the students that have participated in the project and have done lessons with the coaches have found a meaningful and incredible way to learn a new language, which is something that they always struggled with. And the way that most schools and teachers in Italy operate is that if you have a learning difference, this is the method that you have to use. They impose a method. They're not searching for the right one with the student. Okay, so one of the things that people do with kids with learning differences is just to, okay, you need to do the mind map. That's the only way you'll ever learn. And that's not true. Some kids use colors to remember things better. Some kids use their interests. If I teach English to someone that has, for example, a passion for sports, and I include that in my teaching, it's going to get them to be more excited for the learning process, and they're going to remember more things because it's related to something that they know and that they love. So I want to thank again, really from the bottom of my heart, all the coaches that participated, and Rachel for giving me a voice inside this platform. These are my contacts. Also, you can write to Rachel as well if you want to have more information about the organization. And thank you very much, Rachel, for really everything. And everybody that wants to make a difference with these students can volunteer and help them to, have great skills.
Fantastic. Luca, are you in LinkedIn as well? Saskia is asking.
Sorry, say that again.
Are you in LinkedIn?
I am in LinkedIn. I can maybe share a couple of links in the chat so people can find me.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, Luca and Educo, they are setting up this amazing camp for Ukrainian parents and kids. If you know of people in the area in Italy, so that's Milan, Como, that area, definitely please spread the word. And if any of you teachers, coaches are able to volunteer, you're also looking for volunteers to help with the camp. Yes, Luca? Yeah, right. And if any of you, and I'm going to push it to even more extremes, if any of you are interested to also help Luca with funding and fundraising, because it's a non-profit, it's a charity. Yeah. I'm hoping, and Luca and I spoke about this earlier, Luca at the moment is operating in Italy. I'm hoping that we're going to get Luca worldwide with this.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, because the difference that they are bringing for children with learning difficulties is phenomenal. And I have to say as well, thank you, Neurolanguage Coaches, who were involved in this project. And Luca and I are going to be speaking next week because we're going to be coming back into that project. So for any of our Neurolanguage Coaches, you must have Italian knowledge because you know that we build the bridges with the Italian through the languages, and that also helps the kids to make associations. So if any of you here are Neurolanguage Coaches and you're interested to come into that volunteer project, then do let me know, and we'll be starting that up, I guess, for September again. Yes, Luca, when the kids go back to school?
Yeah, that would be the perfect time.
Fantastic. Yes. So let me just come into the final sort of part of today. Can your language coaches help kids with learning difficulties? Yes, absolutely. You know, the increased sensitivity that we have, and we'll talk about that next week. Just to give you an idea, I had one of my coaches call me a couple of years ago. In Belgium he was based, and he said to me, Rachel, I've got a coachee and I have no idea what to do with this coachee because this coachee has a problem with an exam. And every single time he goes to do this exam, he's failing. And it's been like now the fifth or sixth time. And, the client is absolutely on the floor with this. And the first thing I said to him, because he said to me, this client speaks extremely well. He's got fantastic language. Can any of you think what my question was that I asked my coach about the client? What do you think I asked him? So he could speak perfectly, but he was failing this exam. I can see Betsy's writing away there. I'm just waiting. Anybody in the chat box? Any ideas what I asked him? I actually said to him, is your client dyslexic? And he said, I have no idea. And I said, how about you go and have a quiet conversation, gentle. He called me the week after. He said, he's dyslexic. Now, that's the type of sensitivity that we need to have to open our mind to understand, what is it? This client is brilliant at speaking. Something's happening with the written. What is it? And by the way, apparently dyslexia occurs more in languages where the sounds are different to the alphabet. So there's more dyslexia with English and French than with Spanish and Italian, for example. So yes, you know, it is about being sensitive. It's about building up that sensitivity all the time. And speaking with the client, not being afraid to, let's get this out. So, you know, once they aired this and the client shared, yes, I am, then the next thing is, okay, how can we get you into this exam? What do you need? How can I help with this? How can we work with this and get you through it? And together they found the way to really come into this. Now, I think as well, it's the increased respect for individuals here. And can I say, if you're working with kiddies, one thing that Luca said, and it's really very, very much having the awareness, with children, we have to be very careful that they don't feel labeled, because that stays with the kids for the rest of our lives. So we have to be very careful the messages that we're bringing across. I had a kindergarten teacher doing my course, and when we got to this part about how children learn at those ages and how they're just taking it all in, she was shocked. She was horrified, because actually in that kindergarten, they start separating children out already at the age of 3 or 4 with the message, you're different, something wrong with you. Gosh, how can we change that? Instead of that, saying, okay, I need to understand how you need to learn. It's me that's got the problem, the teacher, not you. And that's the message we need to be bringing across more and more. It's my problem that I can't understand what you need, and let's see how together we can find out what you need. And that's exactly what we do as neurolanguage coaches. We really come into the individual learner. We adapt to every single brain. Every brain is different. We all have a different perspective of life. We have a different genetic makeup. We have a different experience and input. And that means that each and every one of us interprets and perceives and receives information in different ways. I need to know what works for you. So this increased understanding, it really does mean that we change and transform the way that we are transferring knowledge. And I'm going to use the expression transferring knowledge. That's what we need to do. So we're coming to the end of the webinar. Neurolanguage coaches worldwide. There are now about 1,200 of us nearly, and more kicking in and coming in, and beautiful community. I want to say thank you, because many of you are in the audience, so thank you for being here. We do carry the accreditation of the ICF, one of the only language-related trainings with that ICF accreditation in the world, and definitely coming into, I'm going to say, a like-minded, beautiful, caring network. And Luca has that first-hand experience of those coaches at work with those kids. We do have the NeuroHeart Education Foundation. Now, I just want to explain a little bit about the foundation, because we set up the foundation in December of 2020. And I actually spoke about the foundation last year at the conference, and we were hoping last year to get launched and get out in the world. However, I didn't envisage that we were going to have such fun and games with the Ministry of Education here in Spain, who requested more information and business plans and viability studies, and you name it, they wanted it. Until last February, we literally were able to give them everything that they were asking for. So everything now has been presented, and we're waiting for the final steps. And hopefully, over this summer, we're going to get those steps, and then we can really kick in with the foundation as well. And as a non-profit, then we'll be reaching over and joining hands with Luca to see how we can really come into that non-profit space to stimulate and trigger more and more of this neuro-heart education, neuro-language coaching worldwide. With that, I'm going to say with the vision that all of you as the educators coming into this, you are the motor for the change. We all know that the systems are failing us. The systems are not changing. But the more that we as the educators change, I've got neuro-language coaches in schools, and honestly, in the schools, the other teachers are kind of going, what are you doing? Because the kids are getting phenomenal results. And that's where I do think all of you as educators are going to make that difference. So this is going to be the sort of motor with the foundation. We're looking at sort of providing the courses. We're looking at bringing in the fundraising. We're looking at actually getting the teachers and trained in this way with the neuroheart, the neuroscience, the neurocoaching. And the teachers then will be getting paid through the fundraising, and they will then be delivering for free. So it should also be, for me, it's a motor for teachers as well to have work. And that's sort of generating work, delivering service, and everything is moving around that model. So thank you, everybody. Do keep in touch. Now, I do have some courses coming up. So just a few minutes of pure marketing, if you will allow me to. And I do want to say as well, you know, recently we changed our price because pre-pandemic, we had a totally different pricing system. And when the pandemic struck 2 years ago, I took the decision to slash the price to 50%. And over the last 2 years, we've been operating with that 50-40% discount on our original price. Now, we've gone to the original price. However, it's very, very easy to get discounts. And with pleasure, we can send you how to get those discounts. For example, if I show you on this page, you can get 50% discount still. The only difference is this time we're asking you to do a little bit of prep first, do the e-course for free, write a little bit of an article about your takeaways, what have you learned from the e-course, and then agreeing to a video testimonial, social media posts. That way you can get 50%. So it's not impossible to get the 50%. And there's even the possibility of getting a 65%. So please, please, please don't be shocked or frightened when we say that we've gone to our original prices. We are still trying to help teachers to come into this, but also having that value attached to what we do, because there's so much that is in what we do, as many of our coaches know.